Well, thanks for joining me. We're in 1 Corinthians 11, and we're continuing here now. Paul is saying, be imitators of me as I am of Christ. How many of us can say something like that? Be imitators of me. Try to follow my example as I am following the example of Christ. He says, now, I commend you because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions, even as I delivered them to you. So they were following some of his example indeed. And he's commending them for that. He says, but I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of a wife is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. So God has this hierarchy of authority that he has set up. And even though man or woman may try to change that, the world system may try to change that, this is what God has divinely ordained. We've got God at the highest. We've got Christ, the Son, in subjection to the Father. Then we've got the man in subjection to Christ, and we've got the woman subject to her husband. So he says, I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ. The head of a wife is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies, apparently this was happening. Men praying and prophesying with his head covered dishonors his head, because whatever the head covering seemed to symbolize something in that day and time. Because every man who prays or he prophesies with his head covered, he dishonors his head. He's dishonoring the authority. And he says every wife who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. Since it's the same as if her head were shaven. Now, women love their hair and it looks beautiful, and God has given the hair for a purpose to enhance their beauty and so on. If a wife will not cover her head, then she should cut her hair short, because it is symbolizing something. And he says, but since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut off her hair or shave her head, let her cover her head. Let her cover her head. So, I mean, when we're interpreting scripture and applying scripture, many commentators and scholars will say this is something that is more relevant to that day and time. But it's teaching us a principle of authority. A man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God. But woman is the glory of man. So the scriptures do set out a line of authority in the home, in the church, and so on. And we have got to make sure that we are not rebelling. We're not going against that. I know this does not go across well for many people. They won't accept that, but we have to stay true to what the scriptures say unapologetically. God bless.